Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second session of the Cannabis Symposium. Today we have James Victor, Attorney Travis Hall, and John Alston. Take it away, guys.
Good morning, everybody. We hope you all are doing well. Welcome to the 2021 SULC Cannabis Summit. I am John Alston. I'm a Southern University alumni and co-founder COO of James Henry SF. Just a quick little introduction and everything, and then we'll get to James and we'll get to Travis as well. I am a military veteran. I flew for the Navy after I graduated from Southern with a mechanical engineering degree. After my naval career and after a short time in manufacturing, I had an unfortunate breast cancer scare with my mother that introduced me to the cannabis industry from a medicinal standpoint. And my mother's doing just fine. It was an early catch. It was a really, really blessed situation for us and everything like that. She's doing great today. And as a result of that, from the knowledge and education that I learned from that experience, James and I started a licensed cannabis company and brand out here in California. We have James Henry SF, which we have a licensed operation to distribute, manufacture, as well as deliver to consumers on our licensed business side here in California. So with that, I'll just give that brief introduction and then pass it over to James, and then we'll get Travis in here as well.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone from the West Coast. My name is James Victor. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of James Henry SF. We are a cannabis brand that is focused on wellness products as well as everyday use of cannabis consumption and how to do it in a responsible manner. John and myself had started this company based off of the science that we discovered in cannabis after he having a breast cancer scare with his mom, as he stated, and me losing a brother to the opioid epidemic. So it was really interesting to find out that cannabis was really an engine that we can use to really find overall health and homeostasis in the human body. One of the things we hope to educate you with today is just understanding the cannabis landscape and all of its intricacies. And it's one of the highest regulated markets. So a little bit about my background is Baruch College in New York City. I have over 20 years in real estate development and also socially responsible development in Harlem, New York City, and a few A-class properties. And I will yield the mic and pass it on to Travis.
All right, everyone. I'm Attorney Travis Hall. I'm from the area. I'm here in Baton Rouge. I'm from Zachary. Attended Southern University through undergrad all the way through earning my law degree. February 2020 bar exam. That's whenever I said I passed, thank goodness. I got my start in the cannabis industry as an intern working for Ilera Holistic Healthcare, the medical marijuana affiliate partnered with Southern. And from there, I gradually worked my way through the company and their former interim production manager, as well as the assistant compliance officer. So hopefully I can come in and contribute some valuable knowledge on some of the nuances and intricacies of the cannabis industry.
Appreciate that, brother. And your expertise here is very relevant. You know, we got some folks on in Louisiana that's interested in getting into this hemp and cannabis industry. So, you know, we know you got some pearls to drop, especially being on both sides. You've done some production and you've done some legal compliance work. And like in your experience, I'll just ask as we proceed to the slides here and everything. You know, what was that compliance work like? Just being in Louisiana, like you were on the forefront, the beginning of the program, and I just know what the regulations were and how that landscape looked when we switched over from Prop 215 to Prop 64 in California.
Yeah, it definitely starting out. It was a challenge because you know, you tend to think that a lot of this stuff can be plug and play, and it's not. You know, going from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, things are going to change. You just can't plug in a SOP from another state and expect for it to work. You know, there's a lot of growing pains and, you know, a lot of patience drafting SOPs and getting a working plan together is, you know, it's a little bit of work, but you eventually turn the corner and you get everything in place where you can start producing, and, you know, it's a rewarding feeling.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I will say that, you know, that insight on the industry is like really good to help introduce. As we're talking about individuals getting involved in the cannabis and in the hemp spaces and everything, you know, those conversations about the operations and about the regulations and compliance is very important. And helping individuals understand that, no, you can't take SOPs and you can't take practices from another state and just plug and play in another jurisdiction, because there are specific nuances and differences in those regulations from state to state. And it's also important to consider when you think about the partners that you're working with, and also any other third party individuals that you have helping you with your licensing or with your actual regulations and practices. And so we'll get into a little bit more of that here shortly. The main thing that we want to talk about is the difference between kind of like the hemp and the cannabis laws. And so, of course, we have the medical marijuana cultivation for THC, and that's above the 0.3% legal limit that it is for hemp. And then, of course, in Louisiana, we also have the hemp cultivation for CBD, but we'll talk about some other products and things that we can gather from hemp cultivation and from those harvested crops as well. I will tell you that both industries are booming and burgeoning. There's a lot of opportunities in both. What we'll kind of get into here is the specifics and everything of how states like Louisiana, states like California, and how the U.S. is kind of handling the cannabis policy across the board here. And so through the slides, you'll see that science will eventually influence law and policy. The reason why we say that science will eventually influence the law and policy is just because right now, for the most part, you have that entire regulation around the THC molecule and the CBD molecule. But in essence, we feel that the plant is the plant. Cannabis is one of the highest regulated markets in the world, especially here in the U.S. And so there are a lot of various nuances and things that we'll talk about here. And I even have a little bit of show and tell for you guys as well. And so, and James, go ahead.
I wanted to add just to that part where John stated is that the science leading and influence law and policy. Currently, the way that a lot of these laws are written, as you go across different states, you'll notice that these policies that are being written actually illustrates that they have no science backing on board in terms of writing these laws, because the law actually contradict the essence of the actual plant itself and how it actually interacts with the human physiology. So one of the companies in which we're part of, which is ACAM, Association for Cannabis Health, Equity, and Medicine, is focusing primarily on that, getting the medical team and also the science and all form of healers around the world to come together to also back these policies as they're being written, making sure that they are centered based on science and not just writing laws just to write laws that we would have to rewrite in the future as well.
That's exactly it, man. Travis, I'll ask you to jump in here and everything. As we're talking about the regulations behind kind of like the hemp and the cannabis medical marijuana portion of it, can you kind of talk to us about what's going on in Louisiana in terms of, if I was a landowner right now, 40 acres sitting in Opelousas, Louisiana, and I wanted to grow medical marijuana, would I be able to do that today in Louisiana?
Currently, not in Louisiana. Right now, there are only 2 licensees in the state, which are LSU and Southern. And as in regards to producing actual THC content-based product, those are the only 2 licensees in the state. Hemp, on the other hand, it's a different story. You know, Louisiana is... They are allowing hemp producers to register and set up their plots and conform to the regulations and start producing. The typical regulations that follow in terms of the medical industry, in terms of testing and reporting and all of those nuances, those still apply in much of the same way as it does to the medical side in dealing with and producing hemp.
Awesome. And so just for the purposes and everything, for the audience, the opportunity in Louisiana is specifically for the hemp. And what we'll talk about later on is the different opportunities that hemp cultivation produces in terms of what you can grow, what type of products you can produce out of it, and what type of market Louisiana has for those products and elsewhere as well. If I'm not mistaken, I think that Louisiana has this regulation or this policy where the Department of Ag basically has to approve the genetics and the type of hemp plants, the phenotypes that are grown. If I'm not mistaken, they have some type of like really hard input in that.
Yeah, there is a system that certifies your seeds. Now here in Louisiana, so prior to you actually dropping seeds and planting seeds, these seeds have to come through a verified source, which has, it's been registered through the state. And there are certain regulations that they must comply with in terms of the quality, it's a certain germination rate that they have to guarantee. And you have to follow those guidelines in order to produce a product that you can sell here in Louisiana. So, if people tend to think that, oh, well, I'm going to grow. I've done all of these things. I've registered with the FDA. I've registered with the state, and I have my land situated, and I have these seeds that these are great, good quality hemp seeds, and you can't just grow or pop seeds, random seeds. They have to come through a verified source.
And even before we get to the seed conversation and everything, there's the whole licensing process in itself. And so to give the audience a little bit of perspective on what that licensing process looks like, I've attached a link in the audience chat for the state of Louisiana and their industrial hemp platform or just their portal. And so it will provide more in-depth information specifically on the licensing process for the state. But in addition to that, just in general, the licensing process itself is probably the most rigorous part of the process just to get going out of the gate. And the reason for that is because there's a pretty thorough packet that must be submitted that talks about your seed and propagation plan. There's a portion of it that talks about your site security. Your site security is very detailed with the number of cameras, how those cameras are positioned at your facilities, what type of on-site security and what type of remote security is required at a minimum. There's also your financial disclosures in there for yourself and for your investors. The states want to make sure that you're not using kind of like money that's been laundered through illegal or unregulated sources. On top of that, there's also like your employee plan and some other things in that licensing package that take a little bit of homework. In addition to that, just on your operational side, the seed and propagation portion that Travis was speaking of is very important. That portion of it specifically because in Louisiana, you have to basically procure those seeds or your feedstock from these verified and approved sources from the state. And so that's the type of homework that goes into your business before you even get started. And to be perfectly honest with you and everything, it's never been more rewarding once you actually have the license in hand and once you're actually going through the process. I know that in California, when we started going through our licensing process, the Bureau of Cannabis Control that regulates our business activity, they were very hands-on and responsive to the application packet. So what that means is that it wasn't one of the competitive application states where you had to have everything exactly right for submission to get approved for your license type. We would submit information to the BCC, and they would actually kick back to us additional questions or additional points of clarification in that process. Travis, do you know if in Louisiana it's a similar process, or is it kind of like one of those things where I fill out an application to the best of my ability, I pay my money, and if it's not 100% right, the state sends it back and then I have to do it all over again? Or
I can't really speak to what it is on the hemp side. Okay. As I was onboarded with Ilera, the licensing process had already taken place. They had already been awarded the license, but compliance is an ongoing thing. And yes, once you have been granted the license, naturally, you've likely already submitted some type of hierarchy, structure, a plan of how you're going to run the business, how you're going to do certain procedures. And that basically lays out the foundation in your framework of your rules that you must follow. Or else you break away from your blueprint at that point. In Louisiana, that's a unsuitable method of operation. The state wants to know exactly what you're doing before you're going to do it. They want to be on notice of what's going on in this space so that they can also track what you're doing to make sure everything is going according to plan. And again, it's a highly regulated process in terms of onboarding employees. Again, the suitability standard is a roadblock that stops a lot of people, regardless of jurisdiction, and it prevents them from working in the industry. And it's an ongoing standard, just as an example of the little things that you have to pay attention to. It's an ongoing requirement that you report if any of these people get arrested or wind up violating the suitability standard. You have to report it. And you have a timeline in which you have to report it and make the state aware of this deficiency. But that's one of a bunch of, very, very critical points to pay attention to, or else you could risk losing your license. At any point, let's say, for instance, if you get a pop-up audit and something's not in, it's not up to code, it's not within the specs, that could wind up costing you valuable time and eventually money, because at that point, you're not running your operation. You're correcting the deficiency.
100%.
And delays do impact cash flow.
Big time. Big time. One thing I can guarantee you, especially in this industry, although it is discouraging, like in terms of the amount of details and paperwork and how highly regulated this industry is, it's probably the highest, most regulated industry in the world at this time, as they're still catching up to understand the science. But I will say that it is definitely worth it. Not too many people, most people get discouraged in the process. I wouldn't get discouraged. Your state will always provide you with exactly what you need. If you feel like you need a little bit more or additional assistance, there's always consultation firms out there who have done the process and can show you track record. Make sure of that. They can show you track record of where they have won other people licenses before you seek out their services. Because just like anything else, there's always going to be people who can promise things that really can't deliver. So make sure that people are showing you the proof before going into the space.
Absolutely. Do your homework. You gentlemen bring up some very important points and everything. And just to piggyback on what Travis was saying earlier about the state wanting to know what you're doing before you start doing it, that goes into a lot of your business planning and a lot of your homework before you even get the license, right? And part of that homework, if you look on the slides, we have it broken down into agricultural, industrial, medical, and nutritional categories. And the reason why we have them broken down that way is because you can grow hemp for any of these reasons, right? Hemp can be transitioned into biofuel, textiles, building materials, of course, our CBD tinctures, our CBD balms, and other types of products. The way that you cultivate hemp and cannabis, cannabis is used for only the medical and nutritional value. We're not really using cannabis for any industrial or agricultural uses per se. And so with that, when we talk about hemp and the business of hemp, knowing what you're growing the plant for will absolutely help you plan your operations, because when you're growing for medicinal and nutritional value, that's a higher cultivation standard. The types of nutrients, the types of pesticides and things that you use on those plants absolutely matter a lot more than when you're growing for biofuel production or for producing building materials or fibers with the hemp plant. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that back home in terms of the relevance to this slide, and also considerations if you're planning on getting into the hemp business. You're getting into the cannabis business and everything on the THC side, which in Louisiana, we only have the only 2 cultivators. But if you're looking at other states like Oklahoma, Florida, even New York, that's coming online and everything, cannabis is a lifestyle, inhalable, basically think about it as a food type of product. The way that you process it, the way that you cultivate it and everything, just think about growing organic vegetables for that matter. The lab testing that's required for those plants is absolutely required for not only the plants, but also for the products. And the reason why we do that is because we just want to ensure, and the state wants to ensure, that you have a safe product on the shelf. If you guys remember the kind of like the vape gate scandals that went on a couple of years ago with the, I forget, with the vitamin E oil and everything. If we take a look at that situation and we identify kind of the nuances in that situation, the illegal market vapes and illegal vape production, because of poor quality standards in the hardware, as well as because of the cutting of the genuine CBD and THC oils, cause those issues. But if you take a look at states like California, Colorado, states that had regulated programs, they actually went into dispensaries and tested those products at random. And they found that all of the regulated products were up to par in terms of the safety and not having any of the vitamin E acetates, any of the heavy metals or anything. So when we start to think about the regulations and how we look at the policies, they are actually helping protect the consumers. They're helping protect us, basically, as we're purchasing products out into the market. Cannabis and hemp cultivation have a really big impact, not only on the environment, but also on your communities in terms of job growth. There's different types of equitable buckets in terms of your human capital, your social equity capital in terms of how Black and brown communities are participating in the hemp and cannabis industries. That's still a very big topic of conversation. We'd like to see more individuals from our communities participate in that. That helps us with our economic equity. Socioeconomic growth in our communities is very important right now. And as we start to talk about the different cultivation methods and everything and how they impact the environment, we start to understand and realize how important our planning in our business processes is, not only for the environment, but just also for our communities as a whole.
100%. Also, in addition to what John just mentioned, is the social equity conversation is probably one of the most important. One of the things that we want to shed light on is to understand what the war on drugs has done to Black and brown communities specifically. It has been documented that the war on drugs was specifically targeted for Black and brown communities, and the devastation and the impact that it's had is still prevalent to this day. So understanding how hemp and cannabis with all of this new trillion-dollar industry that's coming online, to making sure that everyone has a social impact whatsoever within their business plan, to make sure that everyone is unified in the voices, making sure that a lot of these cannabis as well as hemp tax dollars go back into repairing some of the wrongs that was done by the war on drug. Same thing with in terms of people who just have simple possession charges of being cannabis users or patients, now have criminal records that are permanent on their file. And with those permanent records, they are no longer able to be a functional citizen according to the law. So a lot of these things needs to be expunged. A lot of things need to be erased, and we need to restructure this entire economic boom that's coming on the forefront with cannabis, and making sure that it's done with a social responsibility tag stamped on it.
And James, while we're talking about the social justice conversation around cannabis, I think it's also important to note that as an operator, as a license holder, because we still are operating in a regime where cannabis is still federally illegal, there's still some nuanced challenges at the federal level as well, which is another reason why your business and your compliance and regulatory practices, have to be really robust. If your employees or you don't have systems in place for proper loss prevention and control, or reporting some of those incidents, to Travis's point, which loss of product or theft by an employee is one of those reportable offenses, I'm sure. Here in California, it is. Travis can talk more to us potentially about what that says in Louisiana, but these are the type of events that if you don't report them or if you don't have a good handle on them, they can absolutely get you wrapped up in a federal court system. I can't say that I've heard of any notable or mentionable cases, especially over the past recent years, where we've been having more conversation about federal legalization. I'm one of those people where I have the mindset of following the money. The guy that went to the moon or into space, wherever he went, Mr. Bezos said that Amazon will absolutely deliver cannabis. And so with that and everything, you best believe that Mr. Amazon is pumping lobbying dollars into the federal legalization of cannabis because they know what this multi-billion-dollar industry is. So, with that, take it as a grain of salt. Just know that you absolutely have to be on top of your compliance and on top of your business, and you stay out of those troubles. But the risk is definitely worth the reward. I can tell you guys that. And to talk about risk and reward, we're talking about basically the 2020 U.S. hemp acreage by use. Of course, the cannabinoids is our number one category leading right now. And so when we start talking about policy and regulation around different cannabinoids and things, we can touch on this very quickly. We've been talking about THC and we've been talking about CBD so long, and that's basically how we, separate the hemp side, which is a lesser regulated market than kind of like the cannabis market, the THC market. But has anybody heard of this new molecule that they've been talking about recently, the Delta 8 THC? And so the difference between Delta 9 THC and Delta 8 THC is that Delta 9 THC is more prevalent on the cannabis cultivation side, but we can absolutely get Delta 8 THC from the hemp side. And the Delta 8 THC is actually a little euphoric in terms of its effects. It's a little psychoactive, but it's not as psychoactive as the Delta 9 THC. But just to give you guys a parallel between how we as a government have criminalized cannabis and Delta 9 THC versus the hemp-derived Delta 8 THC and the Delta 8 compound on its own. But essentially, the two compounds have similar results, just maybe not as euphoric as the Delta 9 THC. And we'd have to get into some chemistry behind that and why it breaks down the way that it does for sure.
And this is what we talked about with the science catching up with a lot of the laws that are being written, which will allow one product to pass through regulations and not be regulated, but it's getting you just as high as another compound. So it's them not understanding the science behind it or not having any endocrinologists, such as the Knox docs or anything on that matter on their platform when they're creating these laws. So slowly but surely, but we're going to get there, and we're going to get there together as a collective.
I see the chat is going crazy with the Delta 8, Delta 9 conversation. You guys, we might have to come back to that.
Delta 8, Delta 9 that's hot. The idea that you can produce as much CBD as you can and ultimately refine it into THC is mind-blowing. I don't think most people who follow the industry are oblivious to that process. HPLC, machine, high flow, all of that good stuff. Now you're in the business of, you can produce so much more CBD for a fraction of the cost and also still get out a phenomenal product like that everybody loves and keeps coming back to.
That's right. You're exactly right, my man. And we're talking basic chemistry here with just distilling those compounds. Like they flash off at like various temperatures, and when we take this feedstock and we put it through an extraction process and we turn them into tinctures, we turn those oils into edibles and so forth. It's a really, really interesting process from the time we put seeds in the ground to the time we put that product on the shelf. We're talking about the renaissance and restitution here for land ownership, acquisition, and diversification. And the reason we put this slide up is more so on the business side for agriculture. Understanding the different compliance points in each of these processes is really important, right? And so, Travis, I think this is a good time where we start to talk about like our regulatory platform, the infamous metric system. And so, and so what we'll do here is we'll talk about kind of like your day-to-day operations around compliance. We drop some knowledge on you guys about the regulations and the licensing process and everything. But let's talk about your day-to-day operations on the compliance side. And the reason why we pulled up this slide is because it breaks it down really nicely into the actual propagation, cultivation, processing, and distribution side. And so we'll start with the whole propagation and the compliance around propagation, right? Okay. Before you do any soil and planting and everything, Travis, we talked about it earlier and everything, but what's the main thing we want to focus on from a compliance standpoint before we even get to the soil and planting side of this?
Is inputting all of your data, your strains, and all of this good stuff into your metric system. Metric is the platform which most states employ to track the production in the cell from seed to whenever it gets to the consumer with cannabis. And basically at the propagation point, you would take your cuttings, put them into your media, and assign it a tag into metric. And that tag number and that ID basically follows that plant all the way through to the process and the distribution section of the process. And basically every time you plant or start a new plant, the nutrients, the pesticides, the watering, the waste generated from these plants, all of that gets recorded into metric, and it has to be done daily. It's an ongoing process, as well as maintaining actual paper logs in which you have to keep on file and keep record of. Once the plant is harvested, it basically goes into a transitional phase from the cultivation side on over to the production side. And at that point, depending on how you run your operation, whether you are taking multiple plant batches and then processing them into a larger production batch, whether that be a concentrate or various other products that your facility produces, it then gets assigned another production number, which follows that product all the way through testing and ultimately to the dispensaries and then to the consumer.
100%.
And in every part of that process, there are these things that in the industry, we refer to them as blue tags. And so I'll hold those up in front of the camera really quickly. I know those are giving some of y'all PTSD out there.
Oh, man. It's crazy because initially when you come into the facility, you think like, all right, it's a tracking system. No, like it's a very in-depth tracking system. Like Audit basically runs like, okay, the auditor shows up with a magic wand that looks like a tag scanner that you'll see at Walmart, and it basically picks up and detects all of the electrodes and the little sensors in the tag in that whole entire room. It even picks up from the neighboring room. And the caveat about it is everything that's supposed to be in your inventory needs to be in that room. If it's not in the right place, it's not in the right room, whether that was because of a simple mistake or error, somebody accidentally dropped the tag in the trash can. We need that tag. So, it's a bit tedious, but it's doable. Working with your employees, getting them trained, and continuing that training is key. And that works all the way down from your compliance attorneys to your product production managers. Everybody has to be on the same page with managing these plants, or else you wind up finding yourself in a hole, and next thing you know, you got a deficiency. You got to go back, you got to correct it.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why the tracking is so tedious and everything, is because if we do find problems further downstream in the product side, we want to be able to track it back to the source and either figure out what happened or be able to remove those products from those sources. That's one of the reasons why we do it. But if you're not on top of like your inventory locations and your designated rooms where certain products are supposed to be, you can go ahead and get that checkbook out. That's why they come around. The state is not your friend when it comes to the compliance and regulation side, just because of the simple fact that, that's how they're making an additional revenue stream, right? I think in Louisiana, I think in some newly proposed regulations and everything, they were talking about some of the tax dollars going back into some of the law enforcement to help fill in the gaps from, the money that they'd be missing out from criminalizing individuals for cannabis possession and so forth. But we frown upon that type of regulatory language as well. And I think that if you're in Louisiana as a citizen and just as a future business owner, that's the type of language that you want to be on the lookout for so that you can speak out against it. But the processing and the compliance there that Travis just mentioned, that's also just specific to the cannabis compliance or the hemp compliance side of things, right? We also have the environmental, your Department of Ag, your environmental policies and regulations to look out for as well. Because when they find out that you're a cannabis business and that you're cultivating, due to the bad history behind cannabis cultivation and things, it's very, very, very important that you absolutely pay attention to those little minor details and that you ensure that you don't run into these situations where you get popped for a surprise audit or for like a routine audit even, and you're behind the 8 ball just because of like those little nuances and things.
One of the key things that we also say is that if you want to always plan as if you are going to be audited. Don't ever have the mindset of if I'll be audited. No, you are going to get audited. If you have that mindset, I think you'll always be on top of your business, where you will double check everything, cross your T's, dot your I's, and making sure that everything is on the up and up. So always operate with that level of stress factor that you will be audited.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're talking about the agricultural commodity and ingredients, and this is just to kind of show that, hemp competency and cannabis competency is 1 and 1. They all come from the cannabis sativa plants, from a, botany perspective and everything. And that's really important to kind of understand the differences between the two plants for sure here. Here we just talk about the different types of extraction. And I think one of the reasons why we put this slide in is just to, once again, show the different products that can be derived from the cannabis feedstock and cultivating cannabis. Some of the compliance things that we have in these processes when we're processing the various cannabis plants and various hemp plants is that when we're processing into concentrates, we're even doing R&D testing in between that final product phase, because we just want to make sure that when we concentrate this product, sometimes some of the things that we don't want in those products, such as heavy metals or any residual fertilizers and things, we have to pay attention to that. And so those are like some of the, what I like to call the inner network of cannabis compliance and everything that's not required, but they will absolutely benefit your business in terms of saving you costs in the long run. Let's see. This talks more about like the edibles, the topicals, the cannaceuticals. What you need to understand about the different product types is that there's different levels of testing required for those products. So flower requires a certain type of lab testing and everything. It's the basic level of testing. But when you start getting into edibles, topicals, the various derived and extracted products, the testing for that is a little bit more rigorous, and they test for more things. As a result, you do typically incur a higher testing cost as a result of that on the cannabis side. But that lab testing is absolutely required. It's actually a part of your state regulations. And I think that's something that's pretty uniform across all the states. Just so that we don't take up too much of you guys' time and everything, I believe this is the last slide that we have. We talk about the formulation and different delivery methods. Make sure that you understand the regulations in your state for possession. Make sure you understand the regulations in your state. For example, with Louisiana did not have an inhalable product when they first approved their medical language. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the inhalable products have been approved for this year. So kudos to Louisiana and the state for that. I know that one of the questions I saw in the chat was, when will more licenses be available in Louisiana as far as like the medical cannabis cultivation is concerned? I do not have anything on that as of yet, but I can tell you, being in the industry for some time now, I believe what may happen if Louisiana doesn't open up more licenses once they allow the inhalable product, LSU and Southern won't be able to keep up. And I think that once the demand surpasses kind of like the product that's available, I believe the state will have no choice but to look at onboarding either more licensees from an open perspective, or they'll be encouraging Southern University and Louisiana State University to work with more third-party operators and cultivators and farmers so that they can increase that production and demand for production. I believe that's it on the slides for us. Let's definitely hop into some questions here. I want to make sure that we get as many of these answered and make sure that you guys are engaged. We'll absolutely be sharing the presentation, so you guys can be on the lookout for that. And also any other questions that you guys may have for any post-presentation follow-up, we'd love to have them.
Okay, gentlemen, we have a few questions with 5 minutes remaining. The first question is, how can we engage people with the experience growing hemp in states where farmers have to use USDA license due to their state not having licensing processes? ?
Travis, you have anything on that one, especially on the hemp side in Louisiana? Because if it's not a USDA approved state, is the state allowing any seeds from those? Is the state allowing any seeds from like those places or anything?
I can. The only state I can vaguely speak on is Mississippi, which requires the residents to register with the USDA. And if memory, it's been a while since I looked at it, but you free to source your seeds from a USDA certified supplier. It was my understanding of it at the time. But nah, it's not a whole lot that I can offer on the hemp side of things.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. Next question. Can you touch on cannabis business formation and company structuring, how to obtain business licensing? ?
Now that's laid out in the rules and regulations. If you go to the Department of Agriculture's website and go into the medical marijuana section, you can access the regs from that site, and it lays it out step by step in so many ways. Whether or not you would be applying for, let's say, a production license, a dispensary license, it basically lays it out step by step from there.
I'll also add to that, Travis, as well, is in regards to business structuring. I noticed someone asked in regards to 280E tax code. So 280E is probably going to be your biggest hurdle in terms of the business, because what it does is this tax code was written in law specifically for people who were selling illegal guns, drug dealers from the illicit market. This is why the IRS created this code. And so therefore, it will not allow you to write off standard things from your business. So one of the ways of structuring your business so that you can kind of go around that code but still be compliant is to make sure that you have two entities when starting your business. One entity will be a plant touching entity, and that will go under the, it will be abide by the 280E tax code. And the other entity will be your management entity, which you will utilize that management entity to write off as much things as possible that's non-plant touching. So, for example, any marketing, anything in terms of anything that you would need for the business that does not directly touch the plant, you'll be able to write it off from the management company. So always remember that.
Okay.
And the reason why that's so important is just so that you can have an opportunity to write off some of those expenses that you don't get a chance to write off on the plant touching side.
Okay, gentlemen, we have to wrap it up. That was the final question. Great presentation, and we appreciate you.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. To everybody in the audience, I saw you guys ask for our information and everything. We'll make sure we work with Marla to get that over to you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good one, everybody.
Have a good one, everyone.